My name is Adrienne MacDonald, and I'm an associate professor at the John Molson School of Business in the Department of Management. My research area is on sustainable cities, particularly multi-stakeholder partnerships that work on climate action or integrated community sustainability plans.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I guess just to start, if you're willing to share this, what are your thoughts on Montreal wanting to be carbon neutral by 2050?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously a commendable goal. Would it be nice if it were sooner? Yes, but also I understand that lots of things have to be worked on and fall into place in order to reach that goal. I do think it's certainly possible. 2050 is quite far out. One of the nice things, I was looking through the plan, is that it does have concrete actions and targets, and really concrete plans for meeting these goals. So that was really nice to see, as well as plans for monitoring and reporting on their progress. I was also encouraged to see that they've met previous goals and targets from the past, so that indicates that it's certainly possible. Always the challenge in cities is kind of the short-termness of local governments. So while the existing local government might have this on their priority list, it's possible that a new government will be elected, or several new different governments will be elected at the local level that may or may not have these same ambitions in mind. So that can always be disruptive to meeting these kinds of goals.
Would you be willing to elaborate a bit on short-term decisions by local government in terms of sustainability, climate change action?
What do you, it's just sort of baked into the system. It's a challenge because these plans, so their existing plan is 2020 to 2030. Then they have this longer goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. But like I said, if a new government is elected, now I don't know all of the details of these plans, if they will stay in place regardless. Depending on the municipality, some municipalities will have some sort of a bylaw that keeps the plan in place regardless of changes in local government's officials. I don't know if Montreal has that or not. It seems to me that this is more driven by the existing local government in place right now, Mayor LaPlante and her group. It does certainly makes it a challenge, because one of the things that I've kind of noticed in my research is and I don't know that this is the case with Montreal, right? So that's sort of the caveat here. I don't know all of the details, but often what they'll end up kind of doing is doing short-term projects or initiatives rather than sort of programs that are ingrained in and really resourced over the long term. Now, again, I don't know if this is something that's happening with the existing plan right now. So I'm not sure if I really answered your question there, or if that's useful. Did you have something in mind when you were asking?
No, I guess to elaborate on it, which I think you did, but I have something I have to ask on that. I know that it's you can't speak about Montreal, but just in terms of what you've come across in your research, what are maybe some short-term kind of how do I ask this? Sorry. I don't know why I'm struggling to phrase this, but just in terms of what you were discussing in terms of like short-term plans by other government, like is there an example you have, like just sort of like a law put forward?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there definitely are examples. I'd have to look back in my notes because like right now, nothing is coming immediately to mind because this is something that I was looking at like 5 years ago or something like that.
No worries.
So it's just, I can't, think of an example right off the top of my head. And maybe something will come to me as we're talking.
Of course.
But I mean, so no matter what, like, okay, they put this plan in place, but if a new government is elected and they don't have climate action front and center on their agenda, they might get rid of that plan. Or maybe they do have climate action on their agenda, but they feel the need to revive the plan or do something different with the plan. And so they go through the whole process again, which really ends up making us take a step back in some ways instead of a step forward. It's just sort of, it's not just Montreal, it's every local government sort of faces this challenge of there's always that tension between the long-term goals of, climate mitigation and less so with adaptation. So we can talk about that because there are things that, like, adaptation is locally situated. We can have specific projects that we do at a point in time to prepare for, to be like the planting of trees is one example of an adaptation project where maybe the timelines, you can do something like plant 500,000 trees or whatever now, and a new local government is not going to go and just uproot all of those trees. Well, God willing, hopefully not. But when we're looking at something like mitigation, where the timelines to see the outcomes are much longer, I feel like I've just talked myself into a corner here. But I mean, the point is, okay, we see that, okay, we have 2020 to 2030. That's the existing climate plan that Montreal has, okay? Between now, or between 2020 and 2030, it's very possible that, I think the elections are every, 4 years or something like that, or maybe even less. And a completely new set of elected officials might come in. And if the mayor and those elected officials want to focus on something other than climate action, then they're going to take those resources away from those, activities and put them somewhere else, potentially. So that's always that tension. So while we have this plan and we've made these commitments, no matter what, ultimately, they're voluntary, right? They're optional, right? And this sort of, therein lies some of the major challenge, So it's really important, I guess, as citizens, if this is something that we're thinking about, to be thinking about the position that our elected officials or potential elected officials have on climate action, because that really ends up mattering when we're trying to meet these longer term goals. Did that help?
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you so much.
I feel like I walked myself into a corner. Maybe I walked back in. I'm not sure.
No, it was very good. I wasn't too fine-tuned with my question, so I think I made that quite difficult, so sorry about that. But I guess kind of...
No, I think you were kind of looking for some tangible examples, and I just don't have them top of mind right now.
Not a problem, not a problem. So I guess kind of what you're saying, or what I'm taking from what you're saying is that unless we have different parties who are all, who all have climate change policies, within their plan, whether they're on the same page or similar, but just overall do have climate action within their policies, there is kind of that risk that, our city or other cities, based on the government, we won't be able to meet, targets intended by Canada, or just overall targets, these type of things.
Yeah, exactly. Just because ultimately it's voluntary, right? Which is the way it kind of has to be, but it's also a real problem if we're actually going to reach these really ambitious goals. Now, that's not to say that Valerie Laplante cannot, with her team, do lots of wonderful things while they're in office. And it does look like they have some really, really good plans to do lots of, to take initiative in a lot of these areas. Like I said, what's encouraging to me is really tangible strategies for achieving these goals. In a lot of ways, Montreal is a leader, in Canada and in the world.
That's good to hear. That is encouraging. Often when I cover climate issues, it's very discouraging.
Well, yeah, because there's these system level sort of challenges like we just discussed that make it really hard to actually make headway and to actually achieve the goals that we set for ourselves. And yeah, just like I said, these tensions in terms of timelines of how long it takes to enact these projects or roll out these programs and reach these goals, and then the sort of political system that we have, which is important too, because, we don't want somebody to get in there and be in power indefinitely. That's, so it's just this tension and something that we have to work on.
Thank you so much. So what do you think, I guess, what qualifies a city as a sustainable city? I guess, I'm sure there's maybe a long list, so without taking too much of your time, maybe what are some of the highlights of this?
I think yeah, so it's complicated because it kind of depends on the size of the city in some ways. But for example, Montreal is linked up with some global initiatives such as the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. They're also part of G40, which is a partnership for climate change. C40, Cities Climate Leadership Group, so they're part of that. Yeah, so I mean, in that way, Montreal in particular is working towards or aligning their goals with some global objectives, which is important because you're able to get additional supports by linking up with those global networks. But what makes a city sustainable? I mean, it's so. It really, in some ways, depends on the industry in the city and depends on the city. But I mean, okay, so for one, an area that cities have jurisdiction over is transportation. And transportation is usually the most sort of the sector that is emitting the most greenhouse gases in a city, and that's the case for Montreal. It's I think it's 30% of the greenhouse gases is emitted by transportation. So, green cities, something that cities certainly have control over, is looking for ways to make, greener options more accessible. So the metro, for example, expanding the metro lines and making it accessible for people who live further out beyond the existing metro lines. So having sustainable transportation is certainly an area that cities can work on and have lots of impact. Yeah, I feel like it would have been better for me to have the questions to prepare to think a little bit more, because I'm sort of flailing around. But another consideration is biodiversity in the city. So having lots of green spaces within the city, I think is really important. And sort of I'm looking out at Montreal right now from my office, and I can see that it's a city, but it's sort of a city in a forest almost. Like, there are a lot of trees already, which is really nice that sorry, I think we lost connection somehow.
I know, sorry about that. I lost you actually when you just started talking about working with the industrial sector. I don't know if you kept speaking for long. I hope you didn't.
Okay, but I think one thing that sort of occurred to me, I just want to back up, is sort of aligning plans with some of the global initiatives. But I also think as a first step, having a plan. Like, having a plan and having targets and having an action plan is sort of this first step in becoming a more sustainable city. So that's the first thing. The next thing is actually doing the things that you're going to say you're going to do in the plan. Okay, that's the second thing. So and putting resources, putting financial and other resources into the implementation of the plan is super important. So those are sort of the starting points. Because every city is going to have different areas where they need to focus. But yeah, I think that there is some overlap with transportation for sure, biodiversity, and then working with the industrial sector is a good area to, and energy as well. I think Shannon will probably talk to you about energy.
Perfect. When you say it depends on the city, is this kind of depending on what their economy relies on, the size of it, like what are the different things that affect where they need to kind of focus their climate action?
Yeah, I mean, so, first of all, there's like geographic considerations. So the way that climate change will affect a city really depends on where the city is located. So for example, in Alberta, something that is really a huge problem are fires in Alberta and BC, I should say, are forest fires and flooding. Well, I suppose to say, but okay. I'm trying to think about a way to say this without going on and on for too long. But yeah, so the geographic location is going to differ, and that is going to change like where you're going to, for example, focus your adaptation efforts. So if you're in Calgary and for example, and flooding is a really big issue that you need to be thinking about, you might be investing in additional resources for emergency preparedness around flooding. And then there might be other areas that you might be living in where flooding is not such a problem, but perhaps, water scarcity is a problem. Maybe, that's where the resources need to be invested in. Because you can't do everything. And so they'll focus on, whatever are like the major challenges that city faces due to its geographic location.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I guess Montreal, the big one is flooding. Flooding. Yeah, I was reading the parts of the city will be underwater. Just I guess since we are an island, lots to worry about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess so. Yeah, I know that you did say you can't specifically speak about businesses in Montreal, but are there overall just anything you could list about? I think you already did go into how the city could do better. If there's anything else on that, but overall, just businesses in general, maybe more specifically in Canada, what they can do to meet sustainability goals.
Yeah, like here again, there are lots of different strategies that businesses can take, and depending on the industry and the scale of the business, will certainly have an impact on what they choose to do. I certainly think that businesses have a long ways to go, and they have a lot that they can do to improve or to reduce their environmental footprint. I have a complicated relationship with this question. And part of the reason for that is I really, do I want to get into this? I really question whether or not, I don't know if I should say this because I don't think people are going to like it. Like, I just really question whether or not it's possible, let's say, for certain kinds of businesses to be actually sustainable. Let's put it that way. But again, there's a tension. So fundamentally, businesses need to grow. And that in some ways is in direct conflict with like sustainability, because we need to reduce consumption, but business needs us to constantly be increasing consumption. And while there are many things that businesses can do to be more sustainable or reduce their environmental footprint, no matter what, they need to grow, right, at this like very fundamental level. And you know, there are people have needs that need to be met, but I think we're definitely over and above those needs. So this is something I really struggle with, actually. Because I just don't feel that good about our prospects of actually addressing climate change in the current social and economic system.
That's fair.
I'll give you like one example. Yeah. So like, here's an example. So sustainable fashion, or the slow fashion movement, is something that like there are a lot of local brands in Montreal that are could be categorized as sustainable fashion or participating in the slow fashion movement. So for the slow fashion movement, one of the things that companies try to do if they're trying to adopt these values is sort of the longevity of a piece of clothing and the quality of the clothing, so that you buy one shirt, it's going to last multiple seasons over the long term. But I wonder, and one of the things I'm curious about is, can this grow beyond just sort of a niche thing where you just have like a small group that you're selling to, for two reasons. One, because the quality is improved and maybe it's produced locally with like organic cotton or something like that. It's going to be more expensive, so that automatically sort of excludes a large group of people who can't even purchase that piece of clothing. The other thing is, like, fashion, like basically by definition, something is in or not in fashion, and so it's always changing. And so it's just that, like, would I love the slow fashion movement to become sort of the dominant paradigm? Yes, but do I think it's possible, especially when they're sort of up against a whole culture of fast fashion? I don't know. So there are like these cultural norms that are really prevalent in our society and that are, driven by capitalism, and this like sets of values within that system that we have all adopted without even really realizing that, and also not knowing how to get out of that really create a situation where it's hard for businesses to compete unless they're competing on that sort of efficiency growth model. And it's also hard for consumers. Who maybe don't have the time to do the research or the money to invest in, the more expensive options. It's just, I'm not sure how to get around it. So what can businesses do? Lots of things. Will it have an impact? It's possible. I don't know.
Sorry. No, I definitely understand why you're struggling to answer this question. I think you answered it very well, but I do feel, I guess I'm not supposed to say my opinion, but I kind of feel like what you're saying is difficult just because.
Sorry, you're
Can you hear me?
You're cutting out.
Oh. Can you hear me okay? Still an issue?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on with this platform today.
No, you're
Still. Oh, shoot. Any changes? Is it
I think it's okay now. You're like on my end, you're really fuzzy looking, but
Shoot. Can you at least hear me okay? No?
I mean, that's okay as long as I can hear
Okay.
you.
Sorry about this. I don't know what's going on today. But
It happens.
I guess, no, I can understand why you're struggling to answer that question, because it does seem like, the way our businesses, as you said, the way our businesses are modeled are on a capitalist system, and it kind of takes uprooting and redeveloping that system to not be a capitalist system anymore, to actually, accurately address and prevent climate change. So that's it's pretty challenging. So I understand why we can't just focus on businesses. It really is our society.
Yeah, like exactly. There's that system level sort of challenges, but at the same time, I think businesses do need to take more responsibility for their impact, right? Because it's undeniable that they have a massive impact. And I do think businesses need to take responsibility for that. There's no question in my mind that's true. But in the plan, I think, so they kind of say coming back to the 2020-2030 climate plan for Montreal, they say, so ecological transition proposes a new economic and social model that respects the limits of ecosystems and that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then they say for them, that entails adapting to climate change and radically transforming the way we produce and consume goods. And they talk about the circular economy as being sort of one of their strategies to approach that. And I think that the circular economy is definitely a start, and I don't know enough about it or about what's happening with the circular economy in Montreal. I know there are lots of groups working on trying to move towards a circular economy. But I think in some ways, some of the values that would underlie a circular economy are fundamentally at odds with our current capitalist system. And I don't necessarily think that's a problem. I think it's possible for us to adopt new values, but I don't think we should be naive about how challenging that transition would be, because we're talking about a complete cultural revolution, a completely different way of being in this world, right? So it's not just about having the technology, right? It's about seeing business differently, seeing our role as consumers differently, valuing different things. So, can it happen? Maybe. But I think, I don't know.
Thank you. I know I'm asking a lot of difficult questions, so I really appreciate you answering this.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I didn't ask, maybe especially more connected to your research, that you would like to share and you think is important for me to know in developing this story?
No, I think I'm at a weird place with my research right now, because I'm not sure about partnerships either. So I study partnerships, and I study partnerships in this context. One of the things I really worry about is, again, partnerships create another avenue for voluntary instead of mandatory action. And while they can accomplish some important goals, a lot of times what we end up seeing is partnerships not reaching their goals. That's the majority, not the minority. And so I'm questioning that as a strategy. Although really at this point it's all we have as for governance for these kinds of issues. Yeah. I don't know. This would be a longer conversation that I think I'm going to not get into.
That's okay.
So I don't know. I like I said, I'm at a weird place right now where I at one point thought partnerships were really important, and now I'm worried that they could be part of the problem. Of sort of promoting like a market-based approach to addressing climate issues. But I don't have the answers. I don't know. I don't have an alternative or what would be better. So maybe it's the best that we have, and we just have to live with that.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much. Perfect. I don't have any last questions. If there's anything you think of, whether now or later on, please do email me. I'm all ears. Thank you again. I'm sorry this is a bit of a difficult subject, but I really appreciate your time.